Welcome to Parenting Special Needs Live. I'm Shantae. Today we will be talking about tips for inclusion to stomp out social isolation. And we can all begin starting to do that today. And to emphasize that point, here is a famous quote from Albert Einstein. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. And that's by Albert Einstein. And I actually learned about that quote from our special guest today, Timothy Rohrer. He is a young adult with autism who is passionate advocate of disability inclusion. He's also the author of a book called How to Be a Good Influence for People with Disabilities. He recently published his own children's book, Timothy's Story, a story about autism and friendship. And he's created his own website, Tips for Inclusion. He has a YouTube channel. And he's spoken at different schools and conferences. So welcome, Timothy. Timothy, I'm so happy to have you because I think it's awesome that you're out doing this work. So I wanted to ask you, my first little question is, you're quite accomplished for being so young. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
21.
21. Wow, you've done a lot. Congratulations on all that you've accomplished. That's awesome. 2 books or even a guide that helps people learn to be more inclusive. That's awesome. But I wanted to ask you too, in your writings, you talk about social isolation. Did you ever feel socially isolated? And if
Yeah,
so, can you share about that experience and tell us?
I was socially isolated in high school mainly because I tried to fit in with regular ed students, but they did not give me the chance to hang out with them or fit in, fit in with them well. Like I was either excluded from sitting at their lunch table, or some regular ed students would partially include me by letting them sit at their lunch table, but they would not contact me or invite me to hang out with them. And I feel very sad that the relationships between regular ed and special ed students have to be so bitter. And I really want that to change. I feel that we realistically need to be teaching regular ed students how to communicate with special ed students.
Yeah, no, I hear you because I don't know if I shared, but I also have a daughter that's she's 24, so she's experienced some of those things too. So I definitely feel it as well. Since this is the beginning of a new school year for a lot of students, what would you recommend? Like, what would you say is the number one tip for neurotypical children to help them be more socially inclusive?
There's more what people with disabilities it's not what's on the outside that makes up who they are. You have to know them for what's in their insides.
Right. So how would you what would you say to regular typical kids that don't have disabilities? How would you tell them to be more, what would be your tip for them to be more inclusive? Like what would you recommend for them?
For them to to treat people with disabilities the same way that they would treat regular ed people, but needs of those with disabilities, trying being talking in more simpler that people with disabilities can understand.
Right. Okay. And so is there something also you think that kids with disabilities could do to be more socially included as well?
Uh, if we convince regular ed students to pair them up to be buddies together,
To
to pair neurotypical students with people with disabilities for them to experience of hang out with them, whether it could be at a bowling alley, the mall, beach, restaurant, or any place they.
Right, to kind of to have more peer interaction is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, and if there was a student that if you were in a school setting and a student with disabilities was off to their side, what would you recommend to another student maybe that does not have disabilities what would you say? What do you think they should do to kind of break that barrier? What would be the first thing to do if they're sitting at the table? What would you recommend?
You mean like for like regular ed students and special ed students, like together or separate?
Yes. So okay. So I'll say it that way. So if it's a special ed student sitting at a table, and they're kind of by themselves, being isolated, what would you recommend for a general ed student to do to kind of break the barrier and kind of be more inclusive? Like, what do you think what would be the first thing they should do?
Like instead of like passing by them, instead for them to rise up and like uh, and ask like, can I sit? Do you want to come to my table or can I sit with you? If
And
someone with a disability, like if they say no, then they respect their privacy. But if they say yes, they're like, sure.
to kind of include, so
Include
just
them.
kind of start a conversation, be kind, almost in a sense, right?
Yes.
And what do you think? I know I saw that you spoke at schools and departments of education in New Jersey. What do you think schools could do to help with a situation? Do you think there's something schools could do to make being inclusive better?
Teach the regular ed students,
Teach the regular ed students to,
like assign them work in like educational games about this with as much as we do with other subjects like math, English, history, like to teach them disabilities the same way we teach about all the other subjects.
oh, I like that. Like I did read your the ABCs of disability awareness, and I thought that was excellent too. Um, and what is your number one tip that you think? I know you've written, like, I think, is there 10 tips that you've written to help with
In my
inclusion?
pamphlet, there's 10 tips.
So, what is the number one tip that you think everyone could benefit from doing?
Number 9, be sure to spend time with them outside of school. Invite them to come over for a play date or a party. Try
Uh,
to spend time with you to the park, movies, bowling, mini golf, library, or the museum.
yeah. To be a friend, right? That's your tips for inclusion handout.
Yes,
Yeah. And that is available, right? You give it away for free on your site,
yes. One of the first things that will come up on my website.
on your website. Yes, is tips for inclusion. So number 9, and that is to invite people over. Is that, I don't have it in front of me, so just repeat it again. I was gonna just repeat number 9 again so we have it.
Be sure to spend time with them outside of school. Invite them to come over for a play date or for a party. Try inviting them to spend time with you and your group of friends to the park, movies, bowling, mini golf, library, or the museum.
Right. And I'm going to ask this question too because our audiences, we're talking to parents as well. So what do you think parents of children with disabilities could do to help their children? The not being so socially isolated. Do you think there's something parents can do?
The main thing that uh, like we taught people with disabilities a vast majority of times regular ed students, but I feel like that try to do that, it may not always help the regular ed students become aware themselves how to communicate with. Like my theory that is that regular ed students definitely need to be taught how to communicate, and I've been fighting for that change when I was in high school, but administration like gave that a chance at the time.
Right. So do you think though the parents, I mean, if so, obviously your mom or your parents helped you become, right, to be more open. So is that something that other parent, like is that what you recommend? Like what would you recommend to my daughter or to other kids with disabilities? How can their parents help them is what I'm trying to ask.
Reach out to the school about how they can be self-included.
Okay. Reach so the parents can reach out to the school and say, "Hey, now but is there anything that children with disabilities need to learn too? Like is there anything that you think they need to be aware of?"
Like for example, like as a kid, I know that I would talk about flags and science and Thomas the Tank Engine to like the things that I want to talk about, like autism and other disabilities. Like they might talk about things that they they only want to talk about, and even though we have speech therapists and other like teach, teach them how to talk about subjects outside their comfort zone, like they still have a hard time changing the subject, regardless about how many times we teach them how to talk about other subjects.
I think that's an excellent point. You're right. Teach them to talk about subjects outside of their subject, out of their comfort zone, because you're right. Sometimes I notice with my daughter and her friends, they get stuck on the same thing, and it's not necessarily a communication where people general ed, they talk about all kinds of things, right? Not just one thing, one topic all the time. So I think that's important. So parents need to, so I'm going to paraphrase and say it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you would tell parents to communicate, talk with their children, and make sure they have more than one subject that they can talk about. That it's important when they're talking with other students or other kids or friends about lots of topics, right? Not just their comfort zone. Yeah. Wow. Well, I thank you so much. I can't, this is great work that you're doing. And do you have any more upcoming speeches that you're giving or interviews?
I done one last night for Greenwich Autism Alliance.
You did. And how did that go?
It went well.
That's great.
People were inspired by me.
That is awesome. Well, I'm inspired by you. I think that it's
Actually,
awesome.
I'm going to be speaking to Rumson, New Jersey schools through Zoom. I chose to do Zoom, even though in person was offered, because for one, I wanted to keep COVID safe.
Right. Well, I agree with that. We need to be COVID safe, right? And so I want to ask just on a side note too, because sometimes I find for myself, like speaking in front of audiences is kind of like a little intimidating. Um, does that ever happen to you?
When I first spoke, it was very intimidating.
How'd
But
you learn to come over? How'd you overcome that?
I keep doing more of it. Like apparently, like COVID put an abrupt halt to my work, but it didn't stop me from doing it virtually.
Right.
September, like 2020, and
Right. And you're still doing it. Well, I
yeah,
think that's great that you're doing it. And people can find your book. Tell us a little bit about your children's book that you just have out. Timothy
a
story.
story, a story about autism and friendship.
And so does it share some of those tips that you've talked to us about in that book or
In this book, this is the cover.
wow. Wait, show me the cover again because you went a little fast. Okay, very nice. And they can get that on Amazon and at your site?
Yes,
Wow. Okay.
about
So
the book. This is about a boy named Timmy who has autism, and this is designed to teach regular students about autism and about autism particularly.
okay.
And this is the first page.
Okay.
This is I drew the illustrations in this book,
Wow.
and
You illustrate as well?
yes,
You
I
are
like to
very
do art, and this is a skill that came in handy for me to draw.
I guess you have lots of talents. Wow, that is so awesome. And you're only 21. You have so much, you have lots of growth. Keep going. That is fantastic that you do all of that. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask that you would, that I should have, that you'd like to talk about?
Uh, and mainly is that I hope for a change for like for school districts to be educating the grad students how to communicate with people with disabilities,
Yes, I think that is
anti-bullying and drug awareness.
right. Along with anti-bullying and drug awareness, right? They need to be teaching about disability awareness so people could be more kind and we can stop this social isolation, right?
Yes.
Yes, because everybody matters. So, well, Timothy, I can't thank you enough for sharing with us today, and thank you for all that you were doing. I think that it's very important work, so please keep doing it. And I look forward to having you back again and hearing more about all of the things and the changes that you're making happen. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you for being with us today on Parenting Special Needs Live. I think we learned some great lessons from Timothy Rohrer, and I appreciate that he's out there sharing about social inclusion and trying to stomp out social isolation. So please be sure to check out his site. And in case no one has told you today, you are doing a great job. Be good to you. Talk to you soon.